Welcome to a special bonus episode of The Rest is Politics with me, Alistair Campbell.
And me, Rory Stewart.
And I'm Anthony Scaramucci.
I love the way he always says I'm. He doesn't do the with me. He's very much an I'm kind of guy. We like that. Now.
Oh, my God. You're implying egocentrism with that statement. Okay,
no,
which is like, look in the mirror, pal. Look in the mirror.
Differentiation.
Oh, my God.
Now, why are we doing this? Why are we doing this with our friend the Mooch? I'll tell you why. Several weeks ago, Rory mentioned just how many comments he was getting in reply to some of his social media posts, and how many, especially if he was being critical of the US administration or indeed of Russia, would be quite aggressive, quite dismissive, and often quite nasty. He was contacted by someone at a firm called, is it Valent or Valon, who analysed social media interaction, and who said they looked at the responses and concluded that lots of them were from trolls and bots, and he shouldn't take it so personally. So before I get on to what we then decided to do, Rory, just tell us who these people are and what they do.
Yeah, so this is a man called Amir Khan, who was a Reuters foreign correspondent and governance specialist who worked in Iraq, Sudan, and Syria, where a lot of these methodologies were born. So he started work because actually Sudan and Syria have been real specialists, the different factions in these wars in using social media. You would have seen it recently around the attacks in Latakia, where both sides were immediately on social media, producing an enormous number of fake videos, either to amplify the number of casualties or suggest that thousands of Christians have been killed, which wasn't the case, or on the other side to try to downplay the atrocities which were associated with the government. So anyway, he studied all that, set up a company, an AI startup called Valent, but he's now trying to develop a whole bigger plan to detect and respond to disinformation networks, which he thinks might actually be relevant to diplomatic missions abroad. It's oddly not awfully interesting to companies. I mean, it'd be interesting to maybe later in the program talk to Anthony about why actually commercial companies are not very interested in investing in this, and maybe governments are more interested in this. But anyway, back to you, Alistair.
So what we decided to do was Rory, Anthony and I would all tweet around about the same time, a couple of weeks ago, and the same day, around the same time. We all would tweet something, and then Rory's new friend, the analyst, was going to track all the responses over the next few days. Do you guys want to read out the tweets that you sent, or do you want me to do it?
The tweet that I sent out was pretty obvious. Trump is unwell, and his tariffs make no sense. Will the sycophants continue on course or start telling the truth? And so what's interesting about that tweet is Alistair helped me write it. And since he's such a much better comms guy, Rory, he lasted in his comms position about 800 times longer than me. And so I literally plagiarized that from Alistair. But I think the words in there were designed to trigger things, right, Rory? Or it was the tariffs are in there. Trump is unwell, sycophants. And this is something that those bots would catch on to and then fire in a nasty response.
Very good. And then my Trump was
your Trump milder. Or your tweet?
Yeah. My tweet was milder. So it's a sort of a more of a kind of Rory tone. The Trump-Musk-Vance alliance isn't just chaos, it's sabotage, betraying NATO, abandoning Ukraine, hurting our economies, weakening our democracies, undermining alliances. This circus boasts about greatness and efficiency, while they endanger peace, jobs, and our way of life.
It sounds like one of those little speeches that you do at the end of our live shows when you're called to action to take on the world.
Alistair, I thought that was pretty nasty.
It was good.
Yeah, it was nasty. I thought it had teeth to it. Yeah.
Okay. Well, mine went as follows. History will not remember Elon Musk as a genius, but as a sycophantic, unhinged enabler of a failing, deeply corrupt autocracy. A con man who bought his way into the orbit of power, but proved that money cannot buy respect or competence. As for J.D. Vance, the booing has only just begun. This was the day after he was booed at the Kennedy Center. Now, just in terms of the response, and the report from Valent says something a bit different on this, but it doesn't. I think it's because it was done at different times. So mine had 1.6 million views, 18,000 likes, 3.1 thousand retweets. And I said my account said 4.2 thousand replies. Valent's report said 7,000. The Mooch, you were about 271,000 views, 11,000 likes, 1,700 retweets, 7,000 replies, according to Valant. And Rory, 386,000 views, 4.2 thousand likes, 1,000 retweets, a couple of thousand replies. And I think Rory is right that the more you say, I think it was Mooch that made the point, the more that you say things that are likely to trigger people who are going to be against you, the greater the engagement that we're going to get. Anthony and I got the highest proportion of engagement from bots, with about 15 to 20%. That's sort of, professionally organized electronic responses. And we got somewhere between 40 and 50% of trolls. These are either real people or AI-powered content machines. Do you know how they work this out, Roy? How do they actually analyze what these numbers are?
They've got an AI machine and they set up a series of variables and then they mark them against them. So let's say they've got 11 different indicators which are generally associated with a bot or a troll. And effectively, this large language model learns by comparing these tweets to these indicators. And then it tests and drives down to try to get to the bottom of this. It's not 100%, but it's increasingly accurate and it allows them to do an automated way. And they're perpetually iterating to make sure that their model is as accurate as possible. Just to remind people a little bit, a bot is a robot, right? It's a software program which automates the task of attacking you and Anthony. So just to put that in context, I mean, the numbers there are pretty staggering. You managed to get 15 to 20% bots. That means that at least 1,000 of the replies, as you read down, are written by a robot. And probably 2,000 of the replies are produced by a troll. And they could be either real people or they could be an AI-powered content machine. And the same, Anthony, in roughly similar proportions to you. So if people are in this game, be very, very conscious that when you're looking at your 4,000 replies, of those you can end up with about 1,000 of them simply being generated by a robot, and almost half of them being generated by the trolls.
I have a question. How do they find you? Is it Rory is an influencer, Alistair is an influencer, as a hugely successful podcast? Or is it the word search using the word Trump and sycophant in the same thing? I mean, in other words, if an obscure person is writing something very nasty about Donald Trump, do the bots attack them or are they just searching for certain people?
As I understand it, and I'm not an expert on this, there are basically four things going on. The first thing is to do with the velocity and visibility that your tweet achieves. This is called algorithmic amplification, which basically means if the way in which you craft it, you could have very few followers, but if your content really grabs people, there is a natural tendency of people to retweet it, like it, and the algorithm picks up on that and begins to reinforce that, right? The second thing that's happening is the bots are monitoring particular keywords and hashtags. So they'll be out there looking for Anthony using the word tariffs or looking at you using the word Trump or Musk. The third thing they have is they actually focus on particular accounts. So you and Anthony, you've got over 1 million followers each, will be on preset accounts. They're just monitoring you all the time. And the final thing they do is they have preset scripting, which is some of these bots will just respond to almost anybody that says something negative about Musk. They've already written a pro-Musk tweet that will just hit back. And so X itself or Facebook itself or TikTok or Instagram or whichever platform you're using is looking to find content that appears to be appealing. And then, and this is something that Valance pointed out, in the case of our tweets, they appear, although nobody's allowed at the moment by Elon Musk into the back end of the algorithm, used to be the case, they used to be much more open to social media researchers understanding how this works. But it appears from the AI analysis that what's happening is they're taking your tweet, Anthony, or your tweet, Alistair, and deliberately rubbing it in the face of people who disagree with you. They're deliberately trying to provoke it. The way to get the most engagements, replies, and retweets is to make sure, Alistair, that people who absolutely hate you are forced to read what you've written.
Both of those people in the world who hate me. Yeah.
But there are two people on this podcast right now that don't hate you, Alistair, but there are other people that might. Okay, I just wanted you to know.
Anthony, how do you feel about the fact that, because the other thing that Valence Analysis showed is that a lot of the trolls that we were getting were real people, and they were QAnon people, or they were Russian sympathizers. And they went back and checked some of these accounts, genuine people who consistently promote pro-Russian lines and propaganda, and quite often make quite clever little video memes about things that we've said. So, for example, every single time that I tweet, there are people who, and I don't know whether they're real or whether they're bots or they're trolls or whatever the difference is, but there are people who will tweet a photograph of David Kelly, the British government scientist who took his own life and I've often been blamed for his death. And likewise, every time as I do every day, post my tree of the day, there are people who will then add a rope to the tree and sometimes put my head inside it. So that happens every single tweet. Right. But
you seem to like it a little bit, though, Alistair, right?
I don't like the David Kelly stuff. Unlike Rory, I tend not to read the replies because I think you can get lost in them. But how do you feel about the fact that there's somebody in the Russian ecosystem that thinks it's worth going after you?
Well, I'll say a couple of things. The first thing is that my first day in the White House was very memorable for me, but I was upstairs on the second floor of the West Wing in Kellyanne Conway's office, and I have two phones. I've always had two cell phones. She said, "Give me your phones." I said, "Okay, sure." And she went into the notifications section in Twitter, and she shut off my notifications. And she said, "Listen to me. Don't ever, and I mean ever, look at these again. And if you look at these, they're going to drive you wild. They're going to drive you crazy. Do not look at them again." And she handed me back both my phones. And she probably helped my mental sanity because 11 days later, I was blown out of the seat. Okay. And so it was absolutely disastrous, as you both know. Stop laughing, Alistair. I'm going to have our producers lower down your microphone with your insidious laughter.
I'm laughing at the idea of you doing as you were told by Kellyanne Conway. I just can't get my head around that.
Yeah, no, I did because I didn't want to hear the nonsense. But of course, being a human being, now that I've been fired, guess what I did? I turned the notifications back on. And what Rory's saying is totally true. There was a rhythm to it. Okay, so when I started tweeting, the first thing used to be your 15 minutes of fame are up. And you could see it come over in a very rhythmic cadence. It's now 8 years later. I guess my 15 minutes ended, 8 years ago. But the point I'm making is that you could see the algorithms. You could see the attack. And then I'll just make another brief point. H.R. McMaster, in the middle of COVID, sent me a FedEx. And I opened it up, and it was a book from Catherine Belton called Putin's People. Now, Catherine, you guys probably know. And General McMaster said to me, "Please read this book and then give me a call." And in the book is a very long dissertation about what Rory and Rory's friend is talking about. Server farms, fake IDs, fake personalities, real people at keyboards clattering nonsense at people like us, trying to knock us off our game or try to disfigure us, dehumanize us, ad hominem us so that we lose our voice in the debate. And you either have to just be up for that, guys, or not, right? I mean, at the end of the day, I'm up for it. I tell people if I played in the NFL, I would get a concussion. This is part of it.
It is amazing. And I think it's something we've talked about a little bit on the podcast, but it's worth bearing in mind because it is central now to the experience of being a politician. So in my case, statements on social media begin, as you say, Anthony, absolutely with "who the hell are you? Your 15 minutes of fame is over." Then there is everything you say is wrong because you thought Kamala Harris would win and she didn't win. But then increasingly it is you're weak, you're stupid, you've got a low IQ. That was J.D. Vance's thing. I've got an IQ of 110. That's then followed by a lot of people who are like, you wouldn't be able to beat J.D. Vance in a press-up competition. So it's a lot about physicality. And now, more recently, I'm a supporter of Al-Qaeda because we interviewed Ahmed al-Shara. We're part of the global elite. I'm bitter because, Elon Musk did something to my family, and I'm just doing this out of pure resentment to try to get back at him. And I'm bankrupt, and I can't pay my mortgage, and everything I'm doing is a sort of desperate attempt to get attention.
I got to ask you this question, Rory, because I know these sons of bitches. Why do you think you're being targeted? By the J.D. Vances, I mean. J.D. Vance is tweeting at you. So why?
Yeah. Why is J.D. Vance tweeting me? Elon Musk as well. Donald J. Trump Jr. I really don't know. I met a former governor of a southern state yesterday who had reached out to J.D. Vance after that Twitter exchange. This guy was a very kind of earnest evangelical Christian saying, JD, what are you doing attacking Rory? You should be friends. You should be Christians together. What's happened to all this stuff? And he was sort of generally thrown off balance. But Anthony, kind of tell us what's going on here.
I think they target you because you are a rational conservative. They target you because you have a very strong, influential following, and you're a common sense person. The MAGA people are tied to populism, and they're tied to an emotional, impulsive policy directive. You're more and more of a traditional conservatism. And so you've been targeted. Professor Neil Ferguson has been targeted. He's actually, ironically, was a Trump supporter going into the 2024 election, but they targeted him as well. And their thing is, who are the people that could potentially sway people in our movement? No offense to Alistair, but because he is a liberal in their minds, he doesn't have as much influence as you would have. You see what I mean? And they don't come after me, incidentally, because of what Trump did to me. When Trump attacked my wife, Deirdre, on Twitter, his people reached out to me and said, hey, we're sorry about that. Don't come after us. We won't come after you. And so if you notice, the Trump people never attack me, right? Even though I viciously go after Trump, they don't come after me. And because they know, and I'll quote one of them, hey, man, I don't want to be in a fight with everybody Donald Trump is in. You and I were friends for a long time. He should have never gone after your wife. I don't know why Trump needs to go after people's wives, but I'm not going to attack you. You keep the fight between you and Donald Trump, and I'll leave you alone.
Okay, Anthony, Alistair, quick break and then back for more.
The other thing, though, that came out of the Valent report is this thing about grifting, money-making scams. So across the three of us, somewhere between 5, 10, 15% of the accounts had tip jars activated. So these are people who are encouraging their followers to send them small contributions so that they can basically become full-time trolls. And a lot of those, Anthony, are in the crypto world. Now, is that just because the crypto world is full of kind of grifters and scamsters and people who want to make a quick buck? I mean, I don't know anybody in the crypto world, so I wouldn't know what they're like. But
the commander-in-chief of the U.S. military is a grifter and a scammer. I mean, he launched the meme coin 24. I mean, so come on. We know the thing is loaded with a lot of grifters and scammers, which is ironically slowing down the adoption of the good stuff. And so, so listen, anytime I tweet, that happens to me. The grifter and scammer comes in and says to follow this person or follow that person, and this person's Twitter address can make you rich, and pay the $5 and we'll give you the advice on what to buy or sell.
Yeah.
And so that's persistent. Musk promised people, by the way, when he bought Twitter, now known as X, that he was ending all of that, and he was going to have a descaling of bots and descaling of grifters. They've gone up exponentially. The free speech absolutist said he was doing this, and never happened.
Given where our shows are going, just to take it up from the level of Alistair and us deciding to kind of troll the trolls and just have a look at what's going on in these interactions, into the bigger story, because this is now central to politics. In Romania, Anthony, as you're aware, the guy that was running for president has been disallowed because 150,000 TikTok accounts appear to have been coordinated by the Russian government in order to push him into power. When I was running to be mayor of London, I had political campaign companies coming to me saying, we can work for you. You know, we've got connections to Mossad, one of them said, different intelligence agencies. We've run elections all through the Caucasus. We can create, and they gave me a number, you know, how much money I had to pay them for each fake account in order to be able to attack my opponents. And one of them gave an example. They said that they'd sent a sex toy to a prominent running politician so his wife would see it and then film them when it was received. Others of them would say that they could AI generate music and get influencers and pop stars to endorse me. But the whole idea essentially was that if I gave them $1 million, they could create a huge campaign. And of course, this was partly because people were so interested in the way that Donald Trump had done it, which would take me to prominence. Now, Alistair would say at this point, I have to remind people that I did not do this. I did not accept these offers and I did not work with these companies.
I'm sort of jealous. I never got a sex toy in the mail. I feel like I've been left out of things.
But Anthony, it's a very, this will become more and more relevant. And Valence, of course, looks in the ways that Sudan, you get the Egyptian government doing certain kinds of videos, certain kinds of approach. You get the UAE government doing another sort of thing. You get the Russians doing another sort of thing. And the way that this actually plays into civil war in many, many countries, so that people's accounts are exploding with us.
I'll tell you something that's really interesting, though, because we think, obviously, about Russia, because we know that Russia does this a lot. And you remember Prigozhin, this was how he became, as well as being Putin's chef, he became the guy who was running these big bot farms and troll farms and so forth. There's a team at Oxford University that has sort of tracked this over the last few years. I was reading one of their reports yesterday that a lot of this started with the democracies. It's like well, we had a bit of a chuckle on the podcast the other day, Anthony, when the response of the American government to the arrest of the mayor of Istanbul was, we do not interfere in the politics of other countries. I think it's fair to say America has interfered in the politics of other countries for a long, 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 long time. And the Brits do it. We do it. We've got teams that are involved in social media manipulation in different parts of the world. But China, according to this report, has 2 million people. The Russians, it's in the thousands. I think we're probably in the hundreds, maybe the thousands. Russia maybe now the tens of thousands. Ukraine actually had quite a lot before the war started. But this report suggests that 2 million people in China are engaged in generally what you would call media and information campaigns. Now, do you think that is worth, from a geopolitical standpoint, do you think it is worth that level of investment to do this stuff?
I do. I think it's incredibly valuable. I think it's influenced the Brexit. I think the Yellow Jackets have been influenced in France as a result of this. I think it helped Donald Trump so much so, particularly in 2016, and the information from our intelligence community was irrefutable, just reminding everybody that McConnell and Ryan passed sanctions, additional sanctions on the Russian government for meddling in the election. And by the way, Trump wanted to veto those bills. And then we had to point out to him, hey, if you veto that, he's going to call Schumer. He's going to get the necessary votes to override your veto. So Trump reluctantly signed that sanctions bill. But I think it is incredibly influential. And I think that this is something the Russians have been trying to do forever. But now that we have this fragmented media and we have this deployable ability to go into these different social media sites to target people, the GRU, KGB-like misinformation is actually working.
There's an amazing example. Martin Gurry, who's an ex-CIA analyst, has done these big books on social media. But the big example he focuses on is, of course, the Arab Spring, which is the first big Facebook revolution. And what happens there, where we suddenly see social media's power, is somebody sets themselves alight in this small town in Tunisia. And then we have revolutions in Tunisia, Libya, Egypt, spreading across Syria, Lebanon, to some extent Bahrain, Yemen. But the bigger thing that we maybe don't take on board is that you can also draw a line from that to refugees spilling out of Syria, and Jordan and Lebanon being destabilized, Turkey changing its relationship with the European Union, 1 million refugees coming into Europe, which then supports the far right in Europe because everybody's really worried about immigration. And so you're seeing social media producing these very unusual third and fourth order impacts. I mean, who would predict that somebody setting themselves alight in a small town in Tunisia in the end contributes to, in the Netherlands, the far right triumphing in the election, or in Austria, the far right triumphing in the election. And then finally, we talked a little bit about, so just bring you in for a second, the way in which actually Labour was quite savvy with its use of social media, its use particularly of TikTok during the campaign, how good they were at getting engagements, what they decided to focus on, how their social media spend worked, the way in which they made the Conservatives seem a bit leaden-footed.
Yeah, I think so. But I think still within our politics, it is likely that if you are telling things in social media campaigns that are reaching a lot of people that are completely untrue, I think there is still the possibility of blowback. I think that what this last Oxford University report shows is actually the misinformation side of social media campaigning is now much more prevalent and much less likely to be rebutted, not least because so-called legacy media is less influential. This report basically says that they see this stuff now being produced on what they call an industrial scale. And of course, what it's doing is making it harder and harder for people to know who they can believe and what they can believe. And that's being, rather than politicians like Trump and people like Musk challenging that, as you would think that both of them might want to, is actually they ventilate the misinformation. The idea that we talk about social media companies need to step up and do more. Well, we're going to whistle in the wind if we're looking to people like Elon Musk to improve the debate.
It's not profitable for them to do more, though. That's the problem. If there was an incentivized structure to get them to make it more accurate, they would.
Yeah. I guess my final question to both of you. Did what Valent sent us, did it make you feel any more inclined to come off X altogether? Given that it seems that most of the engagement is not with real people, and if it is with real people, they're people who are just trolls. Do you think there is still a point and a purpose to be on there and to be kind of, fighting for the things that you believe in?
Yes, I think the short answer is, even if half of the stuff is robots, I think it's important to have the voice out there. And I think it's also, for me, it's important to have the record out there, because I think we're going through a very tumultuous time, particularly here in U.S. history. And I want to be on record about certain things, so that I've got 5 children, Alistair. I want them to know, hey, at least I stood up for things that I thought were classically American and not the nonsense that's pervading the society right now. So the answer is yes.
I mean, I find it a continual question, right? My friends keep saying, what on earth are you doing? So I tell myself that, what I'm doing is I'm trying to defend a space and Twitter for, reasonable discourse, persuasion, the center right, and everyone's like, you're out of your mind, right? You're not persuading these people, you're not changing anything, you're not defending anything important. But I come back to basically the idea that you don't really want to be bullied out of it. I mean, screw them. I'm not going to prepare to let them just kind of shout at me, shut me down. And I think it's worth making the argument. And oddly, as all of us discover, just occasionally we break through. I mean, in any week, I'll send out something and it'll get, I don't know, a couple of 100,000 views. And then suddenly I'll say something and it'll get 3.5 million views and it'll get thousands of responses. And you begin to think, well, maybe getting through.
You sent me one the other day where you were atting JD Vance and telling him to keep his nose out of Greenland. And it got a huge response, huge.
Yeah, well, that's because I learned from you. Because as soon as I stopped doing these kind of lengthy, pompous things, but just say, nobody wants you, you're not welcome, just stop. Immediately it's like, whoa, everybody loves it.
Very good. We'll keep on learning, Roy. Yeah, I think I'm borderline minded to stay, but I'm with Kellyanne Conway. Other than doing this exercise in the last couple of weeks, I don't look at the replies. I just can't be bothered, and I also don't think you're going to learn anything that much. So just use it as a platform and see where it goes.
Thank you all very much indeed. Thank you.
It's a great discussion.
See you soon.